911 with the address of the emergency. What is the telephone number you're calling from?
I don't know. There's a girl laying in front of my road, and she's fucking dying.
Okay, is she awake?
She's dying. I don't know. Can you send an ambulance, please, very quick?
Okay, I need to understand if she's awake, sir.
She's gargling on her blood.
Yes, you need to turn her on her side so she doesn't choke, okay?
Yeah. Okay. She's on her side. She's breathing. She looks real young, like 16 maybe. She has blood in her ear, and her head looks... She has blood all over her head and the back of her head, but it doesn't look like any more is coming out. I don't see any holes or nothing. It just looks like her head is like dented.
That was the beginning of a 911 call that would expose a triple homicide in Marion County, Florida. The girl was 16-year-old Layla Silvernail. She had been shot in the back of the head, but Layla wasn't the only victim. By the time detectives understood what happened, 3 teenagers were dead, and the people who knew the most were 3 teenagers themselves. One was 17, one was 16, and one was only 12. When investigators questioned them, each had a different explanation. Somehow, every version made somebody else responsible. But eventually, one of them would admit something that changed everything. He had been there, and one of the victims was still alive. It was late on March 30, 2023, in Ocklawaha, Florida. A neighbor heard what sounded like several gunshots, followed by a vehicle hitting a dumpster. When she looked outside, she saw a young woman lying near the road, bleeding badly from the back of her head. She called 911 and tried to keep the girl from choking while waiting for help. Layla was rushed to the hospital, but she would not survive. At first, investigators knew only that a teenage girl had been shot. Then the next discovery changed the case. 17-year-old Michael Hodo Jr. was found along a nearby road with a fatal gunshot wound to the back of his head. Now there were 2 dead teenagers. Then Layla's car was found partially submerged near a pond. Inside the trunk was 16-year-old Camille Quarles. She had also been shot. 3 teenagers, 3 victims, one night. And detectives soon learned that the victims knew the people they were investigating. The investigation focused on Robert Robinson, 17, Tahj Brewton, 16, and Christopher Atkins, just 12 years old. Earlier that same night, the group had reportedly been involved in an armed robbery involving a man who wanted to buy a gun. He arrived with money, but the deal turned into a robbery and shots were fired. That detail became important because detectives believed the later killings were connected to a firearm. Before the suspects confessed, someone familiar with the group gave investigators information about what happened. The source said the killings happened inside the vehicle and pointed toward Tahj. Investigators were also told that Camille had still been alive after being shot. Now, detectives needed to know who was inside that car and who actually pulled the trigger. Robert Robinson was questioned first. Detectives didn't immediately begin with the murders. They started with smaller crimes, including a stolen side-by-side and the earlier robbery. Robert admitted being around when the side-by-side was stolen, but insisted someone else actually took it. Detectives already had video showing he was there, so when he finally admitted that part, they had a way to test the rest of his story. Robert also admitted being present during the robbery, saying a man had arrived with about $200 to buy a gun. Again, Robert tried to separate himself from the shooting. Then detectives moved toward the murders, and Robert immediately denied being there. But investigators already had information placing him with the group. They kept asking where he had been, who he was with, and when he last saw the victims. His answers began changing. Eventually, Robert admitted he had been inside the vehicle, but he blamed Tahj for the killings. According to Robert, Tahj had talked about killing the victims, but Robert didn't think he was serious until the vehicle slowed and a gun appeared. Robert said Layla was driving when Tahj fired, another victim was shot, and Camille was still alive. Detectives kept returning to one question: who fired the shot that finished Camille? Robert initially blamed Tahj, then his story changed again. Eventually, he admitted that he had fired at Camille. He claimed Tahj told him to finish her and that he believed refusing would get him killed. For hours, Robert had insisted he wasn't there. Now, he was admitting he had been inside the car and had shot one of the victims, but he still claimed he was acting out of fear. And detectives weren't finished. They wanted to know what happened after the shootings. According to Robert, the group drove toward a lake after the killings. Clothing was removed because it had blood on it, and Robert said Tahj took the clothes. He believed they were later destroyed. Then 2 teenagers walked away and eventually headed home. The night had started with friends riding around together. Now 3 teenagers were dead, and the survivors were allegedly trying to erase evidence, but Robert's confession created another problem. If Tahj was responsible, why was Robert admitting he fired at Camille? And what would Tahj say when detectives confronted him? Tahj Brewton gave detectives a completely different story. At first, he claimed he had left the group before the killings and had later gone home. But detectives already had information placing him with the others, and Robert had accused him. So they brought Tahj back in. They told him evidence was connecting him to the vehicle. Tahj still denied being involved. Then his story started changing. He admitted he had been in the car, but insisted he wasn't there when anyone was killed. Oh, so now he was in the car after all. But according to Tahj, he never had a gun. He said Robert was the one who planned the robbery. Then Tahj gave investigators a version that turned Robert's confession upside down. According to Tahj, Robert announced the plan. Robert wanted to rob the victims, and if they refused, he was prepared to kill them. Tahj said the group drove into a wooded area where the victims were still inside the vehicle. Money, drugs, and a firearm were in the car. The victims were ordered out, but they refused. Then the shooting started. Tahj said Robert fired at Layla, while another suspect, identified as 35, shot Michael. Camille was also shot, but she was still alive. Tahj claimed Robert saw that and fired again. Now detectives had two suspects pointing at each other. Robert said Tahj planned it. Tahj said Robert planned it. Robert said Tahj was the main shooter. Tahj said Robert fired at Layla. Both tried to make themselves look like people trapped in a situation they didn't control. Make it make sense. If neither wanted it to happen, why were both still there? And why did their stories contain details that matched parts of the evidence? Then there was Christopher Atkins. He was only 12. Detectives knew his account could help connect the pieces. When Christopher entered the interrogation room, the detective took a calmer approach. He first explained the difference between truth and a lie, then asked Christopher about his night. Christopher said he had been home, eaten, watched television, and gone to sleep. Detectives didn't believe him. Instead of immediately yelling, the detective explained that frightened people sometimes repeat a story they have already prepared. Christopher's mother was there, and slowly his story began to change. Christopher eventually described getting into the vehicle and explained where everyone was sitting. Layla was driving, then he described someone raising a gun and firing. Christopher said he thought someone was shooting at them, so he jumped out and ran, but someone told him to get back inside. He returned and then described the victims being pushed out of the vehicle. 3 suspects, 3 stories, and every story had the same basic pattern. They were there, but someone else was responsible. Investigators began piecing together the sequence. The group had been involved in criminal activity earlier that evening. Later, they were together again with the victims. The vehicle traveled into an isolated area. The shooting happened. Layla was left near the road. Michael was found along another road. Camille was left inside the vehicle, which was later found partially submerged with her body in the trunk. Detectives compared the suspects' statements with physical evidence, witness accounts, and other investigative leads. The more they learned, the harder it became for the suspects to separate themselves from the crime. Robert admitted being there. Tahj eventually admitted being there. Christopher's account also placed him inside the vehicle during the violence. The question was no longer simply whether they were connected, it was what each one had done. In May 2023, a grand jury indicted the 3 defendants. Robert and Tahj faced 3 counts of first-degree murder, while Christopher faced a murder charge along with armed robbery and evidence tampering charges. All 3 were prosecuted as adults. The case was now moving beyond interrogation rooms and into court. But it would not end with a jury deciding every detail. Each defendant would eventually make a different legal choice, and Christopher, the youngest of them all, would become an important part of what came next. Christopher Atkins was the youngest defendant. He was only 12 when the killings happened. In April 2025, he pleaded guilty and agreed to testify against Robert Robinson and Tahj Brewton. The same teenager who had first given detectives a simple story about being home was now helping prosecutors explain what happened. Tahj Brewton pleaded guilty in June 2025. Robert Robinson entered a no-contest plea rather than going through a jury trial. After years of investigation and court proceedings, all 3 had accepted criminal responsibility through their respective pleas. Then came sentencing. Christopher Atkins was sentenced to 40 years in prison with a review after 25 years. Tahj Brewton received life in prison. Robert Robinson also received life. The 3 teenagers who survived that night would spend decades dealing with what happened. The 3 teenagers who died never got that chance. Layla Silvernail was 16. Michael Hodo Jr. was 17. Camille Quarles was 16. They were teenagers who went out that night and never came home. the case leaves a painful question. How did a group of teenagers go from riding around together to 3 people being murdered in one night? The investigation showed how quickly one crime can become something much worse. It also showed how difficult it can be to separate the truth from the stories people tell when they know the consequences are serious. Robert blamed Tahj. Tahj blamed Robert. Christopher eventually gave investigators another account, but regardless of how each person described their role, 3 families were left without their children. 6 teenagers got into a car. 3 never came home. And the 3 who survived spent the investigation trying to explain why they should not be held responsible for what happened. In the end, 1 received 40 years, while 2 received life sentences. But no sentence could bring Layla, Michael, or Camille back to their families. That's the part of this case that cannot be changed or explained away. 3 teenagers were dead, and the consequences of that night would follow everyone who survived it for the rest of their lives. If you want more true crime stories told with the facts, the evidence, and the details that matter, subscribe to Fable of Crime. More cases are coming, and you don't want to miss the next one.